Okay, welcome back. We are live with another Between the Pages book chat, and today we have a writing duo with us, Dan and Robert Zangari, and we'll be discussing their book of Princess Errand and their series Tales of the Amulet. And now I'm going to turn it over to them and let them introduce themselves. Take it away.
Go ahead. Well, I'm Dan Zangari. I'm Robert's father. And this is kind of a culmination of a lot of years of ideas that I've had kind of floating around my head and putting them down on paper. And so it's just been it's been like 20 years in the making, getting these stories written and started going. And he's the big push behind it. I was pretty content to just kind of go, just kind of have these stories to ourselves. And he said, we need to write these and publish them. They'll be really good.
Yeah, it's actually been more than 20. It's been like since 1991.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm losing touch of my decades here.
It just all blurs together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do a lot of the co-author of the series as well. I do most of the writing, and I also do the cartography work for the maps that have been in our books.
Oh, that sounds cool. I love maps.
I do too.
Yeah, I draw my own maps. I'm trying to get a little better at drawing my own maps.
Yeah, it takes time and practice. I typically hand draw them first, and then I'll scan them into Photoshop and then redraw them again.
Yeah. I was lucky for the maps I did for my trilogy. I could keep pretty simple because it's a seafaring thing, so I wanted like simple sort of, that sort of map. Anyway, so why don't you give everyone a quick overview of the series, what it's about, characters, stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll start. So the series is essentially about a quest for an amulet that was created centuries ago by a race of dragons, and they created it in an attempt to control another race of dragons. And the amulet, after the war was over, this dragon war was over, the amulet was basically broken into different pieces that could be reassembled and hidden. All the parts were hidden, all the information about it was hidden. And now, centuries later, things are coming to light now about that amulet. And there's different groups of people that are now seeking out this information and trying to find parts of the amulet. And so we've got different competing priorities of different people. And we have elves, we have humans, and so they're competing in trying to find the pieces of this amulet, and they all have different motives and different reasons for trying to find it.
Yeah, so this is actually our second go around of the series, and so we had written a few other books before, but a lot of our fan base had said it feels like it kind of started a little too far in the middle. So we went back, and that's where Princess Errand came from. And so that's actually the very beginning of their quest. In fact, the original book we first published back in 2013 had the prologue of them finding this information, which that actually is now the climax of A Princess Errand.
Oh, interesting. So you sort of wrote the series a little bit and then went back and did a prequel that became the first book.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
That was actually the initial idea. Was we're just going to make this a prequel, and initially I thought it was going to be a small novel, maybe 80,000 words max, because I had an idea for the plot while I was writing what was then our third book in the series, and then we were getting ready to publish the fourth one when we decided, let's go back and write that one, and just so we can give some more clarity to the story. And we also changed our writing style. We were writing in an omnipresent present tense form, so we swapped it to a limited third person past tense style for the prose, and that just kind of made the story go boom. And Princess Errand, once it was finally edited, was clocked in around 325,000 words. So now
Yeah.
we're rewriting the other books so that they can match the same caliber as the Princess Errand.
Yeah, a point of view sometimes can make a story take off all right. So tell us a little bit about the main character, his hopes, his flaws, stuff like that.
So we got a couple, two main characters in particular. I'll describe Iltar, and you can talk about Cornor. Does that sound good?
Sure. Yeah.
So Iltar he's a wielder of magic. A lot of people call him, in his sphere of influence, call him a necromancer, but he's actually a lot more than that. And unlike most heroes in a typical fantasy adventure, he's actually in his mid 50s, and he's not a young person trying to kind of discover himself. So he knows exactly who he is. He knows what he's gone through. He does suffer from some trauma with his parents' death when he was 14, and that trauma carries through a lot of the story and is part of what drives the plot and some of his decisions, and that ultimately leads him down this quest. And he's very much kind of taken the role of the wise old mentor and is content to just to sit back. He, at one time with Cornor, our other main character, they had gone out venturing and explored the world of Calda, and they ended up retiring just a year or so before the events of A Prince's Errand. So they have all these adventures and all these this history that they have behind them, and now at this point in time, Iltar's like, okay, I'm ready to be done, and so is Cornor. So that we kind of find him and Cornor both in a situation where they're kind of enjoying the retirement life, and then the call of adventure comes.
Yeah, and Cornor is really the exact opposite of Iltar. Cornor is a fighter. He's when I say fighter in the sense of a Dungeons and Dragons type, he's a swordsman, and he had a totally different upbringing than Iltar. He's married and has a family, and like Robert said, they had a lot of adventure history before with one another and different things that they did. So he's a veteran. He has a following of other adventurers that he trains. He's trained a lot of different men and women in sword fighting and fighting in general. So he's like the classic type of a fighter type guy who is, as Robert said, kind of at the end. He's getting ready and he's looking forward to retirement and wanting to just kind of set his sword and his shield aside and just kind of relax. And he gets pulled back in by the draw of this whole potential adventure. So he's kind of torn as he's coming back into the fray here. And so he's got some things pulling on him in different directions, but he's a little bit more grounded than Iltar. He doesn't have a lot of the issues and emotional trauma and baggage and that kind of thing that Iltar has. And so he's kind of like a counterbalance to Iltar. And he knows Iltar very well. They're very good friends. Like I said, they've been together for years and years. So he knows how Iltar operates, acts, and how he's going to react in different situations. So he can we see this later on in the other parts of the story, because in this particular story, they're not together that much. But when they are together, you can kind of see how Cornar is very, how do I want to say this? He's very protective. He's very watching out for things for Iltar, and just kind of is there to kind of calm other people down whenever Iltar kind of gets a little crazy. And so he's kind of, like I said, the kind of that counterbalance to Iltar.
Yeah. So I like the fact that you have older protagonists in the books. I mean, that's not typical.
Right.
So how has reader reaction been to that?
Surprisingly, a lot of readers have loved it. Some of the reviews that we've gotten on Amazon have said that, it was a bold choice, and they said we actually pulled it off pretty well. Most of our readership that we're targeting are kind of the adults between 25 to up. And so there really hasn't been too much of a backlash or reaction about that.
No,
but
really.
When we first started out, I think I'm trying to think back, the original draft, my dad actually had an age gap between Iltar and Cornar. And so we revamped it before we ever published anything so that they would be the same age. Initially, Cornar was going to be more or less the sidekick. And then he kind of evolved into a bigger character as we wrote the story and said, let's make these guys, equals and co-leaders in their adventuring band. But for the most part, people have liked it. All of our beta readers have thoroughly enjoyed it. And I know a couple of our readers who they're in their mid-30s. They said when going through it, they haven't noticed that big of an age gap. But when it does happen, that they know, the character is older, it kind of seamlessly goes back into the story, and they haven't really had any problem with it.
Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about the world that these characters live in? And because I know you mentioned dragons, so what else can we find in that world?
So there's a lot. So we got several different dragon breeds that had inhabited the world, and at the current time of the series, there's only the platinum dragons that are left, but they're kind of in hiding. There's also a bunch of dragon men, which we've created a word in our dragon language called the Kisha, and so they're half dragon, half human. And so there you get introduced to those guys in A Prince's Errand. We have our elves, that there's a couple different groups of elves that are in the world of Kalda. But there's also other races too. One of the prequel novels that we're working on, that kind of go before Tales of the Amulet that I'm finishing up right now, they have a race called the Ishari, and they're kind of like elves, but they are accustomed to the cold. So almost kind of like the Andorians a little bit from Star Trek. But they inhabit the icy continent of the world. There's also a few other dragon types that we have that are kind of lesser dragons. One of them that you see in A Prince's Errand is called a Gangolan. And Gangolans are, I guess to put it simply, as apes are to humans, Gangolans are to dragons. So they're not as intelligent, but they're super strong. And then there's a whole slew of other creatures that we created. I think I was looking back at our bestiary the other day because we've been considering 5th edition D&D variant for our world, and I think I counted 73 different creatures that we've created throughout the different books. One of the other sentient races that we have that is actually in Prisoner of Tardalum, and you do see him in A Prince's Errand for one of our greater Calda chapters. His name is Fench, and he's of the race called the Tuladine. And they're these kind of fairy-like creatures that are they have some really weird amalgamation of features. They're mostly gray, but they have these seahorse-like snouts, and they got tails and a couple sets of wings, and they're pretty small. They're, well, actually not too small. They're about the size of a toddler, and so that's one of the other sentient races that we have on Calda. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, well, we have, let's see, we have werewolves, we have vampires, we have, what else?
Yeah, we have different other subtypes that are normally found in classic fantasy, like the werewolves. But for the most part, in The Prince's Errand, that's what you see mostly. There's a group of, I guess I would say, subhuman called the Wildmen that you encounter in the middle of the book. And you learn throughout the story that they were twisted by magic, but they were once human. So we kind of have some of those mutated things where either dragons, humans, or elves have been mutated in some way and created another subspecies.
Sounds interesting. So, what kind of antagonist is in the book and series? Is it sort of man against the obstacles in the quest, or is there actually someone that they go up against?
Yes, there is a dark god that is essentially the main antagonist of the entire series, who's briefly mentioned in our prelude, and that's the leader of the dragons that had started that war that my father had mentioned that needed the amulet. As far as The Prince's Errand, there's a couple antagonists, which for Iltar and Cornar's line. Cornar's antagonist kind of evolves into an antagonist, being an ally that then becomes an enemy, and that's Kaiasus, one of the Mind-Alarmed princes. For Iltar's line, I wouldn't say he mainly has the Mind-Alarmed Empire's royalty that are kind of his antagonist. Mm-hmm. His story doesn't start out that way, though. It's kind of his is a journey of discovery, and he ends up stumbling across these prophecies and ends up having these very bizarre dreams that are so lifelike and vivid, that are kind of spurring him down this path. So as far as his eventually evolves into that the royalty becomes his ultimate antagonist by the climax. And they all have, the Mind-Alarmed Empire has varying motives. Each of the princes have different goals and aspirations, but the driving event that kind of catalyzes their antagonistic actions is in the prologue, when the mages of Elath attack the Mind-Alarmed Empire during one of their celebrations called the Feast of Sorrows, and they kill the emperor. And so that assassination is, and their idea of vengeance and seeking justice is what spurs the conflicts for Prince's Errand.
Interesting. So you have a little politics in the mix as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what was the hardest type of scene for you to write in the series?
I would say the romance interactions in Iltar's line. For me, I don't typically read romance, and my wife devours romance, and so I actually had to take it to her on a lot of sections and say, "Am I getting this right? What do you think?" And so she helped a lot in crafting that. So for me, that's probably the hardest. And on the flip side, the easiest for me would be writing battle scenes. So the romance for me is the hardest. What about you? What were some of the hardest ideas to come up with?
So I think some of the hardest, well, let's see. I'm more along the lines of wanting to write actions type scenes. And if it's not that, it's kind of hard for me to write something that's a little more building up, say, to an action scene. So that some of that part of it was difficult for me, because they're on a journey, and so parts of the journey are not all that adventurous at some points. I just want to get to that's my writing. That's why he's good.
Yeah, I fill in the gap.
Yeah, I write. I mean, I just get to the point. When I write, it's like, broad strokes, bright colors, and it's like, and then he takes over and says, "Oh no, we gotta build these characters up. We gotta." And I was like, and I'm like,
flesh out the scene a little.
Yeah,
more.
We gotta flesh out the scene a little bit more. And I'm like, hey, I just want to get to the exciting part of it. And so we work together good that way, in that respect, that I kind of focus on that and those kinds of things, and he focuses on, let's build the characters and let's bring these people to life, before we kill them. This story,
Yeah, make the readers care before you kill them off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so what's your favorite scene in A Princess Errand?
You want to go first?
Let me think. I gotta think about
I'll
it.
go first then.
I know you probably have.
So probably Iltar's climax I would say, it's a whole slew of chapters, and it's, I would say, between the end of chapter 64 and I'm going to condense it. All of chapter 65, where Iltar kind of finds himself in and amidst he's about to go in and free his apprentice, and that's my favorite thing. And when we were listening to the audio and hearing Michael Kramer narrate all that, and just the way he pulled it off was like, holy cow, that's awesome. I had little goosebumps. I typically was getting goosebumps as I was reading it and writing and editing that section, but when I heard it, it was like, whoa, okay, this is my favorite spot. What about you?
I think my favorite spot is it's towards the end. It's of course it's Cornar's part of the story, and it's where it's basically his confrontation with Kaiessus, his final confrontation there with that battle and that activity that's going on there. It's kind of climactic for that part of the story, where they get to where their goal is. They finally get to where they're trying to get to, and all hell breaks loose. And it's a big, and it isn't just those guys. There's other stuff that comes into play. The elves show up, and other things happen, and it's like a free for all, because everybody's fighting everybody at this point. And so that, for me, that was kind of my favorite part of it.
Yeah, the whole war game.
Yeah, the whole war game thing. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, so I think on that note, we'll wrap it up, and I'll let you tell everyone where they can find you and your books.
You can find both of us on Facebook. Also, our individual author pages on Goodreads and Amazon, just under our Dan Zangari for him and Robert Zangari for me. And we do have a Facebook page called Legends of Kalda, Kalda. And our website is also that www.legendsofkalda.com. You can visit us there for updates and information. And then you can also find us on Kickstarter. So we've done a couple Kickstarters for our books, and we'll probably do some more in the future.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, your book is entered in SPIFBO 6 this year as well?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so
we're excited for that.
I'll be keeping an eye on it. I am not entered this year because I didn't have an eligible book, but I was last year, and so I'm in the group, so I'll keep an eye on you guys and see how you go.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw the listing go up I think, in the authors of the Indie Fantasy Addicts group, and I thought, I'm going to try to see if I can get in, because I heard about the competition last year and knew that it filled up fast, and luckily we were able to just slot right in.
It's tough, but I had a pretty good time last year. Got some sales, got a nice review out of it. Didn't make the cut, but I got close.
Nice.
At least I hope I got close.
You get all that exposure too, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's
and I increased my to be read list quite a bit. So
yeah, I know there's a lot of quality work there that I've seen, and then saw it there, and I thought, okay, we should read through some of those. So.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for being here today. It was a pleasure chatting with you. And Between the Pages Book Chat will be back on the weekend with more authors. So join us then. And that's it for today. So bye, everybody.
Bye.